Bandersnatch. When I first heard of it, actually I found it on Netflix and didn't know what to expect. And when it came up with this option, I said, oh my God, this is like a choose your own adventure book come to life visually.
Yes, absolutely. But like an adult version of it, using modern storytelling with possibly inappropriate stuff like suicide, drugs, and
So major trigger warnings.
yeah, major trigger warnings there. But it was fascinating and like really out of the box.
Yep.
All right, let's get into it then. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tales of Our Times. This is a show where we discuss the stories that move us, what makes them so meaningful, and why others could or should find meaning in them as well. This is not a spoiler-free show, so bear that in mind as you continue to listen. Though today, the spoilers might be a little bit weird because of the subject matter.
Totally weird.
My name is Amanda Stevens. I'm your host. And before we get into my two lovely guests, I want to remind you that we're back in Meta March. This is our first example where we're discussing stories that push the boundaries for the medium they're published in. And so right now we're using the word meta and metatextual. If you don't know what those mean, you can check out last week's episode where we defined all sorts of different kinds of metatextuality. But we may change our minds on what the right word to describe these kind of stories is because by their own nature, they're kind of boundary pushing. So perhaps by the end of the month, we'll have something new. And so to discuss what I think is another wonderful and very well-known example of this kind of boundary-pushing storytelling today, I have my lovely guests, Kim Gordon and the unofficial co-host, Michelle Chiang.
Am I here that often?
Welcome back, you guys.
Hey.
Hello.
It's such a pleasure to have you both here. The first time having two guests.
Yeah.
Yay.
Returning guests.
Yeah, check out Kim's other episodes on Tales of Our Time or
I did the Little Mermaid.
also on Geek
Excuse
Out.
me.
Yeah.
So like, you guys are both kind of professionals at like this
Recording.
at my show.
I am a recording artist.
And I do have
Yeah.
to say that when you mentioned spoiler alert, and it's going to get weird because not everything we say that we think is a spoiler is actually a spoiler about your track. Through.
Right.
Is because bear in mind it is a choose your own adventure. So
Yeah. Again, we said it at the intro, but just in case, there might be a few content warnings for today's story because it is like a lot of these kind of boundary pushing stories. It's a little bit more in a darker place than usual. So there are mentions of drugs, suicide, murder, possibly some like spooky demon stuff.
Yep.
If that's
Parental
not your
trauma,
bag-
a bunch of stuff like this. So
Yeah. If that's not your deal, not your bag, you can skip to the next episode where we'll be discussing a special kind of murder mystery. Our questions this time will be a little bit different as well, but they should be kind of in keeping with what you expect from Tales.
Yes.
So today we're talking about Bandersnatch,
Bandersnatch.
the Netflix series.
Yes.
Not series, but like original video.
Yeah.
film.
It was a
Interactive
film.
film.
It's an interactive film based on or out of their series Black Mirror, which is which gained quite a bit of fame when it first came out because it was so. Black Mirror itself was out of the box. And then Bandersnatch being an interactive Netflix series, I think it was the first of its kind, like ever.
Well, I actually don't know if it was the first of its kind, but it was definitely the first of
First
its
on
kind that
Netflix.
gained such popularity. I would
True,
also
true.
push for that
True,
too.
true. On a major streaming platform.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think we should kind of summarize our own experiences.
I think so. So to get this started, since this does function as a choose your own adventure book, let's give two little precursors there. If you've never heard of those before, a choose your own adventure book is a book where on each page something happens and you get to make a choice, like between A or B for what you would do in the scenario. It's one of the few forms of media that is written in second person. So it literally says, you do this, you do that.
Yep.
And depending on your choices, you can flip to another page of the book and continue reading there. And so Bandersnatch does that, but in a film form.
Yep.
And the Black Mirror series is kind of like a Twilight Zone
Yes.
redone, which basically means that it's like a dark science fantasy or, is it called predictive fiction? I don't remember at this moment.
It's a criticism
Speculative.
and speculative is a
Yes.
criticism of technology specifically, generally.
And kind of in its own existence,
Cautionary tales.
yeah, kind of in its own existence does belong in Meta March. A lot of people know Black Mirror stands for looking at yourself in a turned off screen. So it is already kind of, by its own nature, meta. Bandersnatch takes that even farther, and there's other layers we could go into. But I think first, do you guys think you could summarize the overall story, like points that everybody would have in common if they did the Bandersnatch?
You follow a young kid that's pitching a video game. So I'm just going to call him the kid. But he wants to pitch a video game idea that's also essentially a choose your own adventure type video game. And you follow his adventure to the publishing company, and the decisions you make along the way impact the overall storyline. And
to publish your game.
To publish the game. And also, like, it's small choices and big choices. And it demonstrates the volatility of the butterfly effect itself, too. But you only really understand that when you watch it a second time.
Yeah.
So I watched it with my own morals in mind. And unlike some people. And
Michelle.
And so I had a fairly decent time watching it in terms of like what happened. And so
Can I ask a question real quick? When you play through the story, are you making decisions as Stefan?
Yes.
Okay.
So he's like your third person protagonist in a video game.
Sorry, continue.
No, you're fine.
You went on with like your own morals and you had a pretty good time of it, so to speak.
Yes. And I also didn't know that it was going to be interactive like that when I first put it on.
Yeah.
And so it comes up with, I think the first choice is what song you want him to listen to on
Serial.
the bus. Oh, the cereal. That's right.
Cereal.
It is the cereal. And that impacts your entire day.
Wow. Yeah. That's kind of a good example of the butterfly effect. For those, if you haven't heard about it, the idea is that every small event, even something as small as a butterfly's wings, can impact other things happening around the world.
Yeah, and it's all part of chaos theory and stuff. So so this whole film is like absolutely chaos theory in motion. And so like I pitched it to Michelle. I was like, this would be really cool to watch together. We can make decisions together because it's going to be different every time you watch it.
Yeah.
More or less. And then Michelle's journey
was
quite different.
I'm not an evil person.
You
Generally,
say this every time you come on my show, Michelle.
she really wants
Every
you to
time you
believe
come
it.
on this show, you say, I'm not an evil person.
look, if given the choice to be the hero or not, if something is happening and I'm it's my choice whether to save a life or not do it. It's obviously I'm going to make a better decision here. But when it comes to making the choices in Bandersnatch, I was not very moral.
Yeah. But also, like, it's not real life, right?
But
It's a story.
I also need to preface this that I watched Bandersnatch not knowing what it was about. Didn't even know it was an interactive storyline.
Yeah.
Didn't know the genre at all.
Yeah.
Because it's genre defying in its own way. So I pitched it to her. I was like, oh, it was really cool because it's like choose your own adventure and it gets real, right? But then she watches it with me.
I make some decisions, and which leads to
Murder.
Well, not murder straight away, but like, okay, so
Not murder.
instead of choosing to go to therapy, which is an option, it's like you either go to see the doctor or you follow that coworker dude down the street. I follow the coworker dude down the street, and then which
needs
leads me to his
therapy?
house where I'm given the option to take acid. And of course, I choose to take it.
we do not condone this action.
No,
but it did happen in the game.
It happens in the game, right?
story.
Movie. And then while high on drugs, you are given you're given this whole like conspiracy theory that this place is not real and there's like parallel universes. And, and then you're given the option of either jumping off the balcony yourself or having Colin do it. So I had Colin do it.
Well, you didn't want to die.
And then demons appeared.
Oh,
So, you know.
a little bit different from
Which was not
Kim's
what
playthrough.
happened when we watched it together, because I think you went to therapy in the one we watched.
No,
You
that's
didn't go to-
exactly what happened.
No, because the demon didn't show up then. The demon showed up out of the blue from the TV later on.
So what I'm getting here is that Michelle's playthroughs contain multiple demonic
Yeah,
episodes.
she texted me last night. She's like, so there were more demons, and I was like, how? How did you find
There are more
more?
demons, and eventually you're back in the house, and this kid, and I'm saying me, you as the, person,
player, the
player,
main
perspective.
character.
You're having a fight with your dad, who is kind of an overbearing parent. There are other story timelines I read that have him actually be performing some kind of child experiment on this kid.
Oh,
Yeah, I
which
did
is
that
real
playthrough.
interesting and very meta.
Yeah,
we can
very
talk
dark.
about that in a minute. But so I chose to kill the dad, and then what are you going to do with
As
the
you
body? Do you dump the body or do you chop it up? And I said I chop it up, and apparently that is the only choice that leads to the success of the video game Bandersnatch.
wow. So good news. Yeah. So technically, your story was technically successul.
But at what cost?
Yeah, I was just going to say, really the definition of at what cost.
So basically, she chooses violence every time.
Chaos. I made the chaotic decisions.
Well, so let's get back then to talking about it like as a story, but also like as a medium. So technically you said that you counted this as like an interactive movie.
Yep.
And it is interesting that like it is about making a video game. And so they gamified the, I'll call it a movie for the time being, right? Do you think that you consider it more of a game or a movie? Or would you still consider it a movie given the fact that it is so interactive and so different?
Not to sound snobby, but like
Yeah,
as a
everyone.
gamer,
Yeah.
I guess like since childhood, I
Yes.
still classify it as a film personally, just a step up from your typical, just like 3D films were kind of a step up in the 4D and so on and so forth. Just slightly different variation of the medium. I wouldn't consider it a game personally.
Well, can I ask you why you would draw that line? And then I'll get Michelle's opinion. Because I am curious. Like, I kind of want to dive into, like, what do you think the differences are between those?
That's a good question. I think because I think it would edge on the border of in between, and it also depends on what you qualify as a game.
Yeah.
And for me, it still felt less like a game because the only thing you're doing is making choices, and video games aren't necessarily just making choices. It's
You have more
exploration,
control, right.
and and there's definitely more control. There's items and so on and so forth. Like so, and it also depends on the genre of video games you play, obviously. But
Because I was going to say, there are visual novel games where
Yes.
that is how you play. Is you read and then you just make choices.
yeah, so like and like the dating sim games and stuff like that. Like if I were to qualify it as anything remotely close, it would be in that line of video
Yeah.
games.
You
if
feel like
anything.
it would be closest to like a sim game or a visual novel.
Yeah, like I
but
guess
it's a film, so it's not
yeah,
technically
because
visual novel.
there's consequences, but not in the sense that it does impact the story. I don't know how to, I'm not really
Right.
sure how to.
It's okay if you don't really have a clear answer. That's also fine too, because this is we're just kind of trying to dig into that, right?
It's a good question, and like I'm gonna let Michelle talk for a second.
let's
I
have
think, and
Michelle.
That way I
What's
can
your
think about
opinion?
it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it walks the line between film and game so well that it breaks the barrier of both. Because if you're watching it from the standpoint of expecting a film, then it is, from the film standpoint, it's fantastic film, cinematography and stuff, and very immersive. And then when you added the game element to it, it like broke the film. And if you're looking at it from a game standpoint, then you're looking at, this is not like computer generated, following a character around, those graphics, right? This is an actual actors, and the sets were really well done. So from a game standpoint, yes, you are only making like one of two decisions at a time, but the story is so much more immersive because of the film element. So it breaks that. And even within the choices that you're making, it in itself questions what it is and who's in control.
Yeah.
Which is why it's a great example for this show.
Well, I think that probably is true because while, like to Kim's point, it doesn't necessarily have like a lot of the physical trappings that we associate with video games. So there's no health bar. There's no, I don't know, is there a pause menu?
Not a menu. The way
Right.
I see it is in a sense that it's not that different in a way as like pausing a movie and coming back to it later.
Yeah.
And still not knowing what's going to happen. It's just,
Sure.
it's so close to being a video game, but you're not actually controlling the person. It's sort of manipulating you.
Well, let's kind of get into that too then, because and I think that's an interesting thing too, right? That's kind of the point of this, is to explore those mediums that make you say like, I didn't know that a movie could do that.
Yes.
Which I think is really a good example for Bandersnatch. And I think it is kind of interesting to grapple with the idea of like, when you gamify something, does it become a game? And that's kind of like a discussion for another day, because there's a lot that we could get into in that. But if we were to tie let's go back to the story itself.
Sure.
And the idea of metatextuality. So metatextuality is when a story does something to remind you of the fact that it is like a story, or it plays with the idea of it being a story. And so we discussed 5 examples of a way that something could be metatextual. And I want to read those out to you now and ask you to pick, in what way do you think that this is most exemplified, even if it qualifies as multiple. And so those ways are when something is self-referential, when something breaks the fourth wall, when something blurs the line between the fictional world and the real world, when a narrator does too much or too little, and when a text reminds you of the fact that it's a text. in this word, text means whatever physical medium you're using. So it would be the video. So in what way do you think that this would be most metatextual?
So last night I fell down the Bandersnatch hole of making, by the by, you can pause and then you can also reverse your choices to make different ones if you so wanted. And for the sake of this show today, I rewatched it last night and I went through as many rabbit holes as I could. There is a route of choices that you can make. First of all, Bandersnatch is the video game that this kid is designing based off of a book called Bandersnatch.
So it's immediately self-referential.
Yes. That is a choose-your-own-adventure book.
Yes.
Wow.
And he's making a choose-your-own-adventure video game. And then at some point, something happens and then he starts shouting at his computer like what is this? What do you want? Who are you? Who are you? Right? And you're given the option of saying like Netflix or this weird little symbol that is a recurring symbol in the series. Yep. So if you choose Netflix, then you're led through a sequence of events where he's at his therapist's office and it's revealed that this is a set and it is Netflix that's filming it. And it's just
choice.
It's really interesting. It's like it does break the fourth wall.
Yeah.
And it's just, it does
And
all
your
of the
brain.
things. Yeah, all the brain. All the brain is broken.
Yeah. I guess, Kim, do you have a kind of like a different answer to that? Or do you think that Michelle kind of summed up? Because she touched on some things you mentioned before as well.
Yeah.
For like the metatextuality
For
of it.
sure. I think it hits 4 out of 5 of what you'd said. And that's like almost intentional on the part of the writers.
I mean, I guess I would say I almost feel like it does really a good job of not breaking the fourth wall, not that one, but instead I would push for mixing realities because it feels like it does that more than others. Only because for something to break the fourth wall, it has to address you, the person.
It does. In a way, because it prompts you to make the choice for it.
Who are you?
It's true, but I think that moment would be the one where he's asking you, who are you, would really be the moment where it's actually addressing you.
Yes.
I don't think that by
it does.
nature.
It does. No,
when you select Netflix, you have to explain to him
who you are.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I think it's an instance of that happens that is probably the most breaking the fourth wall. Though, based on what you've said, I feel like the greater direction is mixing realities.
Yes.
Because
and questioning it
right.
itself.
And in so kind of addressing you without actually physically addressing you, the person, which is usually what that fourth wall break looks like. I would also say, like, thinking about it for today, I realized just how kind of self-referential it was, given that Bandersnatch itself is a creature from Behind the Looking Glass, which is an Alice in Wonderland book, for those of you who don't know, which is also about going through a mirror into an alternate universe.
Which is an option that happens in Bandersnatch.
Well, in Bandersnatch is in the story Black Mirror, and it is inviting you to go into this alternate world. So there's a lot of different like levels of metatextuality and other things like that.
If you haven't watched Bandersnatch, please go do that because nothing we said is actually a spoiler.
There are so many options, or not outcomes. Outcomes is the better word. That it doesn't really
outcomes and options.
Yeah.
So instead of asking you to give it a one phrase subtitle, in our own meta moment, like if you could come up with a word to describe like this medium of storytelling, since we said it doesn't quite fit a movie, it doesn't quite fit a video game,
a single word,
or like you could do like a 2-phrase, like if it were hyphenated as well, that's fine.
I would say genre fluid.
Genre fluid. Ooh, that's a good one. And also like physical, like text fluid.
I would definitely say mind-bending.
Mind-bending. Yeah. For the story itself, it's mind-bending.
Yeah. It's very reflective, being, a mirror, right? What are the consequences of your decisions as the viewer?
Perhaps one could look at this as the thesis statement for the Black Mirror series.
Indeed.
Well, that's all the time that we have for it today. There's going to be a lot more coming at you for Meta March. If you like this is the kind of story we're discussing. Next week, we'll get into a book that, as I like Kim's word, is both metatextual and genre fluid. Very good. We're going to be searching for a word all month.
Media fluid.
Well, media fluid. We'll go through. If you have thoughts, please message us. We would love to hear back. I would love to hear back from you on your input. But in the meantime, thank you, Michelle and Kim, for both coming. Thanks for being my first 2 guest season episode. I hope everybody out there enjoyed listening to Tales of Our Time on Radio Taiwan International. I have been your host, Amanda Stevens, with my fabulous guests, Michelle Chiang and Kim Gordon.
Thank you.
Thank you both for coming here. And I guess like kind of a stinger. Mind your morals.
Make better choices.
Make choices.
Or chaos.
Oh,
No.
God. Mind the butterfly's
Mind your
wings.
morals.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.